Your tax dollars pay for them, and that is the salaries of Ohio's elected officials. Exactly what are they worth? And should that be reviewed, you may have a chance to have your say this November. Ohio Senate President Keith Faber joins us with much more on your bill on the Pay Commission. What is the Pay Commission?
Well, it's essentially trying to take the politicians and the politics out of pay raises for elected officials. What we determined was that no matter whether it's the legislator's own salary or other elected officials, politicians have a funny way of trying to influence what their own pay is. And so we've determined that, like a number of other states, at least 14, that it's better to have citizens determine the pay of politicians. And so we have put forth together a resolution that will go on the ballot if the House approves it, and ask Ohioans to amend Ohio's Constitution to create a constitutional pay commission, a group of individuals that will set the pay for elected officials, except in those home rule jurisdictions like cities.
Now, we are talking about reviewing the pay not only of judges, but also all the township trustees even.
It's everybody from the governor all the way to the township trustee level. Look, we all know that certain people deserve fair and adequate compensation. The question is, what is that level? And from my perspective, it's better to be established by a citizens commission than a bunch of politicians saying, hey, if I give the county commissioners a raise, maybe they won't run against my state representative friends. Those kind of things, that political pressure and political posturing has gone on for years and years. Look, it's been 8 years since anybody in the State House, 2008, will have a raise. Nobody can get a raise in the middle of their term, so it'll be at least 2016 before any elected officials get raises. That may be too long. There are some elected officials that probably deserve additional compensation. I would argue some deserve less compensation. But the end of the discussion is who's best to decide that. We think that a citizens commission is best.
Briefly describe how the commission is made up, who's on it, and how many members.
Well, I'll start out by telling you who's not on it. You can't have elected officials on it. You can't have their family members. You can't have people who work for family members or people who have run for office within the last 12 months. It's important that this be citizens. So we also excluded people who lobby or advocate for other people, because we don't want lobbyists setting legislator salaries either. And so ultimately what we did was create a group of citizens. It's 9 people, so it's a good cross-section. And the goal is to have people with some gravitas, people who are going to be able to consider the constitutional factors that are included. It's things like the economic condition of the state. It's like the wage of the median Ohio household. It's things like other similarly situated jobs. What are they paying? What are other similar elected officials in other states making? All of those factors to get a good cross-section of what the compensation should be. And from that perspective, the goal is to make sure you provide adequate compensation. Look, I'd be the first one to say that maybe judges, prosecutors, and sheriffs probably need raises. You've got sheriffs who make less than their deputies. That's probably not a good long-term management strategy. But I would also be willing to concede that there are probably other elected officials that compensation is fair and adequate. That's why the Pay Commission will have the ability to adjust the salaries up or down, with one exception. The judges made a very logical case. The judges oversee, in their role, the legislative activities and the things we pass. And you don't want a legislature or a Pay Commission to come in and say, hey, well, we don't like how you ruled on this case. We're going to take your salary down as a punishment. And so judges, unless there's an economic crisis in Ohio, should probably be exempt from the downward pressure. And so the bill, the resolution includes that provision.
Is there a cap involved about how much of a pay raise the commission could give during a certain time?
There is not a specific cap. However, there is a presumption. And the presumption is that the pay will not deviate more than CPI or 3%, whichever is lower. And essentially, look, we don't want to see somebody come in and say, I'm going to raise salaries 25%. If they're going to go outside that range, they need to do specific justification and reasons why as part of their report. And the nice thing about this is we didn't ignore checks and balances. After the Pay Commission makes its report, the legislature, by a supermajority vote of the legislature, can still override the Pay Commission for particular salaries. Let me give you an example. They come in and say that Ohio is roughly a $150 billion biennial enterprise. We ought to pay the governor a salary like a guy who runs a $150 billion company makes. Well, I'm pretty sure the legislature would override that and say that's too much money. And so if the legislature acts to override the Pay Commission recommendations, The legislature then is prohibited from receiving any compensation adjustment during the remainder of their term. And so the incentive there is the legislature can't go to the governor or somebody else and say, hey, we're going to override the pay commission if you don't do what we want. The legislature then is banned from having any adjustments during their term.
The pay commission meets how often then?
Every 2 years is the proposal. Now initially they'll meet a little sooner, but then every 2 years they review, and they have the ability, remember, to go up or down. That's the key to me, is the ability to go down as well as up.
Final message to Ohioans this November then, should this be on the ballot, is what?
Isn't it time that we take politicians out of setting their own pay? Isn't it time that we put citizens into setting the compensation of elected officials? I think it's a far better process. It's far better than having legislators do it, because the reality is legislators have done it. Pay is set for politicians by legislators, and certainly in those circumstances you still have the legislators having the ability to override, but this will make it fairer, more consistent, and frankly give them the ability to go up or down as well.
Again, look for that on your ballot this November. Senate President Keith Faber, thanks for your time.
Thank you.